In 2018, the U.S. China trade war reached a critical point when President Donald Trump imposed a new set of tariffs on Chinese goods. While tariffs were a central point of contention throughout the trade dispute, one of the more controversial moves came when Trump, in an attempt to curb the fentanyl crisis in the United States, called for tariffs specifically targeting Chinese exports of fentanyl-related chemicals. China's response to these tariffs escalated an already tense situation, adding a new layer of complexity to the ongoing trade war. In this video, we'll examine the significance of the fentanyl tariffs, China's response, and how this move further intensified the trade conflict between the world's two largest economies. The fentanyl crisis in the U.S. Before diving into the specifics of the tariffs and the responses from both China and the U.S., it's important to understand the root cause behind Trump's decision to target fentanyl. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times more potent than heroin, has been at the center of an opioid crisis that has plagued the United States for years. The opioid epidemic in the U.S. has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, with fentanyl playing an outsized role in these deaths. The vast majority of fentanyl that enters the U.S. is believed to come from China, either directly or through intermediaries. According to U.S. authorities, Chinese chemical companies and manufacturers are major suppliers of precursor chemicals used to create fentanyl, as well as the finished product itself. While China has taken steps to address the issue, including cracking down on fentanyl production and trafficking within its borders, the flow of the drug into the U.S. continues to be a significant problem. In response to this crisis, the Trump administration took aggressive action. In 2018, President Trump signed an executive order calling for the U.S. to take measures to stop the flow of fentanyl from China and other countries. As part of this broader strategy, Trump imposed new tariffs specifically targeting Chinese chemical producers and exporters of fentanyl-related substances. These tariffs, which were part of a larger trade war framework, were intended to both punish China for its role in the opioid epidemic and force the Chinese government to take stronger action against fentanyl production. The U.S. China trade war. To fully understand the significance of the fentanyl tariffs, it's necessary to revisit the broader context of the U.S. China trade war. Beginning in 2018, the U.S. and China began a tit-for-tat series of tariff hikes that affected hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. The Trump administration accused China of unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and currency manipulation. The U.S. also complained about China's trade deficit with the U.S., which Trump believed harmed American businesses and workers. China, for its part, pushed back against the tariffs, arguing that the U.S. was using its economic power to stifle China's growth. As the trade war escalated, both countries imposed tariffs on one another's products, with China targeting key U.S. exports such as agricultural products, automobiles, and machinery. The trade war caused significant disruption in global supply chains, increased uncertainty for businesses, and contributed to a slowdown in global economic growth. Despite the trade war's primary focus on broader economic issues, the fentanyl tariffs added an unexpected and highly sensitive layer to the dispute. Trump's focus on fentanyl was not just an economic issue, but also a political one. The opioid crisis was a top concern for many American voters, particularly in the Rust Belt states that played a crucial role in Trump's 2016 election victory. By targeting China over fentanyl, Trump was able to portray himself as tough on crime and responsive to the concerns of American citizens suffering from the opioid epidemic. China's response to the fentanyl tariffs. China's response to Trump's fentanyl tariffs was swift and multifaceted. First and foremost, China strongly objected to the U.S. approach, framing it as both an overreach and an unfair targeting of Chinese manufacturers. Chinese officials argued that the fentanyl issue was not solely China's responsibility, pointing to the role that other countries, including the U.S. itself, played in both the production and demand for fentanyl. At the same time, China took steps to address the issue domestically. In 2019, China announced a significant policy shift. It would classify all forms of fentanyl as a controlled substance, effectively banning the production, sale, and export of fentanyl and its analogs. This was a direct response to U.S. pressure and an effort to show that China was willing to take action on the fentanyl crisis. While this policy shift was significant, it did not entirely resolve the problem. Despite the ban, some Chinese chemical companies continued to find ways to manufacture and export fentanyl, often by using new, unregulated chemical analogs that were not yet covered by Chinese law. This loophole led to continued tensions between the U.S. and China, with the U.S. accusing China of failing to enforce its new regulations effectively. In addition to the policy shift, China also responded to the fentanyl tariffs by escalating the broader trade war. In retaliation for U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods, China imposed its own tariffs on U.S. products, including agricultural goods, automobiles, and energy products. These retaliatory tariffs were designed to hit key U.S. industries and put pressure on the Trump administration to negotiate. China also took a diplomatic approach, lobbying other countries and international organizations to support its position. Chinese officials argued that the U.S. approach to the fentanyl issue was overly aggressive and that the U.S. should work with China and other countries on a multilateral solution. However, despite China's efforts, the Trump administration remained firm in its stance, refusing to back down from the fentanyl tariffs. The escalation of the trade war. The imposition of fentanyl tariffs was just one aspect of a much larger, more complex trade war between the U.S. and China. As both sides escalated the conflict, the global economy began to feel the effects. The tit-for-tat tariffs led to higher prices for consumers, disrupted supply chains, and increased uncertainty for businesses operating in both countries. The trade war also strained U.S.-China relations, making it more difficult for the two countries to cooperate on other important global issues, such as climate change, international security, and public health. The fentanyl tariffs added a new layer of complexity to the trade war, highlighting the deepening divide between the two countries. While the U.S. focused on its domestic concerns over the opioid crisis, China viewed the tariffs as an unjustified attack on its economy and sovereignty. This tension was further exacerbated by the broader trade dispute, which was fueled by accusations of unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and a growing sense of nationalism in both countries. Despite these challenges, there were attempts to resolve the trade war through negotiations. In January 2020, the U.S. and China reached a Phase 1 trade deal, in which China agreed to purchase more U.S. goods and make structural reforms to its economy. However, the deal did not address many of the core issues in the trade dispute, and the fentanyl tariffs remained in place. The long-term impact on U.S.-China relations. The fentanyl tariffs and the broader trade war between the U.S. and China have had lasting consequences for the relationship between the two countries. While both sides have taken steps to de-escalate tensions in certain areas, the trade war has led to a fundamental shift in how the U.S. and China view each other. No longer just competitors in the global marketplace, the two countries have become adversaries in a geopolitical struggle for dominance. The fentanyl tariffs, in particular, have underscored the challenges of managing complex international issues in a globalized economy. The opioid crisis, which was initially seen as a domestic U.S. issue, has become a flashpoint in the broader U.S.-China trade dispute. Both countries have attempted to use trade policy to address the problem, but the solution has proven elusive. As long as the fentanyl crisis continues to affect U.S. communities, the U.S.-China relationship will remain strained, with the potential for future trade conflicts. Conclusion. The imposition of fentanyl tariffs by the Trump administration and China's response marked a significant moment in the ongoing trade war between the two largest economies in the world. While the fentanyl issue highlighted the role that China plays in the global drug trade, it also revealed the deeper geopolitical and economic tensions between the U.S. and China. The tariffs and retaliatory measures escalated the trade war, creating new challenges for both countries and the global economy. As China continues to take action on fentanyl and the trade war rages on, the long-term impact on U.S.-China relations remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the U.S. China relationship will continue to be a defining factor in global economic and geopolitical dynamics for years to come. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye for now.